Hello, I'm Charles Hubble, your host and narrator for our podcast series, Deceived, the Moo Years. Deceived, the Moo Years is the true story of one young man's compelling, at times terrifying, former involvement with the martial arts cult Chung Moo Kwan.
The following story you are about to hear is true. It took place between 1980 and 1996. Most of the names have been changed. There are other versions of the story. My name is Russell Johnson, and this one is mine.
Deceived, the Moo Years, Episode 5. Russell's circle of friends grows smaller. Russell had friends outside of the Moo school, but the more involved he became with the school, the less he hung out with them. His goal was to become a Chung Moo Kwan instructor, so he wanted to surround himself with people who had the same goal. In most destructive cults, members have a dual personality, the person they are within the group and the person they present to the outside world. Craig Matthews was the younger brother of instructor Dan Matthews. He was the same rank as Russell, but considered a higher belt. Craig and Russell decided to get a place together and moved into a 3-bedroom townhome. Craig's older brother Roy also lived with them. Shortly after moving in together, Craig and Russell were told Black Belt Course 3rd Section student James Holt was moving in with them. Being ranked lower, Russell had to give up his bedroom to James. Russell built a new bedroom for himself in the unfinished basement using old shipping pallets and cardboard.
Students were pressured to move in with other believers.
Why was that done?
They have more control over you, so you had no other outside influence other than through Chung Moo Kwan.
Living with other school members, you treated them the same as in school. When they became assistants, they would call each other by the title assistant. Russell checked with Craig and James before he ate to see if they needed anything. He opened doors for them. If they had noticed that Dan Matthews was on his way, Russell would quickly clean the place as though getting ready for an inspection. Once, Russell was told to go to Dan's house that he shared with another instructor. To his amazement, Dan's house was a complete wreck. Every time Dan stopped by, he'd look at Russell's stereo system and say, "What are you doing with a nice stereo system like that? When I was your level, I never had anything like that. I only owned 2 pair of pants. You should sell that stereo, bring the money down to school, and move up faster. Yeah, it's nice, but what have you done in your life to deserve something like that? If you sacrifice now, then later on you will be set mentally, physically, and financially. Think about everything that Master had to go through to teach you." Dan went on to say, in life, what we really own is our mind and our body. You can't take possessions with you when you die. This was repeated by instructors in the school as well. Eventually, Dan wore him down. Russell could not sell the stereo system for what he paid for it, so he sold it to his older sister for $200.
Even though I had worked and paid for all the things that I had, I was told that I had not yet earned the right to own them. I was made to feel ashamed for having them. One by one, everything of value that I owned would be sold off.
Chung Moo Kwan ID card. Within a few months of Russell's return to training, he tested for 4th Section belt along with Craig Matthews and James Holt. At 4th Section, students were able to add a stripe of black around the collar of their uniform and earn the title assistant. Besides his 4th Section belt with his name and rank embroidered on it, Russell also received his Chung Moo Kwan ID card. It stated his rank was registered with the Asian Chung Moo Kwan headquarters and was signed by Master John C. Kim himself. Russell was amazed that it was actually signed by Master Kim. The school supposedly had 5 million students worldwide, so Russell had this image of Master Kim constantly signing ID cards. But in truth, the ID card was nothing more than another prop to perpetuate the belief in the Asian Chung Moo Kwan headquarters. This place where Russell believed his rank was registered did not exist.
I didn't know it at the time, but the whole Chamuquan Asian headquarters was complete bullshit, a complete con job. They advertised it on their literature, the instructor certificates, and even John C. Kim's certificate. Even the instructors believed it existed.
At fourth section, Russell was provided student lists with everyone's names, addresses, phone numbers, and birthdays. The list went from the highest instructor down to the lowest assistant. Russell did not know it at the time, but this list would one day prove invaluable to him in his stance against the Moo. Master Kim's birthday. Every year, a party would be planned for Master Kim's birthday on April 1st. It's ironic that the man who would con, fool, and deceive so many would be born in April, the fourth month of the year. 4 was believed to be an unlucky number, and on April Fool's Day, known for practical jokes. Many would question if this was really Master Kim's birthday. One project was decorating cakes for Master Kim's birthday party. The school usually ordered decorated cakes with tigers made of icing, but they always looked weird or funny. James Holt had many talents. He played guitar and was an artist, so he took over decorating the cakes. They would normally make a cake for each school, and one for the birthday party. Usually, they would be up for a couple days getting all the supplies needed to decorate the cakes, then stay up all night until the last cake was finished. Each student was expected to give Master Kim a cash birthday gift, as much as each could afford, but it had to be at least $100. They were told the money was not for Master Kim, the money was for their future. Master Kim invested the money into Chungmu-kwan-owned businesses, and whatever students gave toward school would one day be returned tenfold. Yet others would report that some of that money was lost during Kim's gambling trips to Vegas. Also, students couldn't give the cash gift in just any birthday card. It had to be just right. For a couple of weeks before Master Kim's birthday, they went out looking for the perfect birthday card. It couldn't have any writing inside. Though most students had never met Master Kim, they were expected to write a personal birthday message thanking him for passing down his wisdom to them. There could be no pairs of animals on cards, as this represented couples and love. No pictures of cut flowers symbolized something dead. Most cards featured a ferocious tiger. Students would gather several cards and submit them to the instructor for approval to be used for their cash gift to Master Kim.
The whole birthday card deal was another form of servitude. We would spend time to find just the right card to be selected for our cash gift. The Moo had turned it into some type of honor to give Kim our hard-earned cash.
He was trained by Kim to get students to pay for lessons in cash. Instructors cashed their paychecks and gave Kim the money. School owners paid for schools in cash, and everyone had to give Kim cash birthday presents and prayer money.
There would be a birthday party in honor of Master Kim. He would never attend, but the preparation would begin weeks before. During the 1995 conspiracy trial, witnesses testified that birthday money would be driven or flown to wherever Master Kim was. He strictly enforced its collection. In 1985, the party was held at an instructor's house. Students from all the Minnesota Chungmu-kwan schools attended. At the parties, there was always plenty of food, and sometimes they'd play games. Instructors were still called by their title, and if students saw a higher belt arrive at the party, they raced to open the car door for them.
I always thought the whole car door opening thing was weird. You would be with a group of students and the instructor's car would roll up. You would race to open his door. Sometimes you would be in the uniform, other times in your street clothes. My mom taught me to open the car door for a woman, but opening up for another dude was just plain weird.
Bulgogi, Korean barbecued beef, was always served at the party. Said to be a favorite of Master Kim, the dish was secretly hated by many. Christmas parties. Yearly Christmas parties were open to family and friends. Planning for the parties started weeks before. Lists were made of everyone who was attending and who was bringing what, planned to the last detail. But more important than the party was another cash gift for Master Kim. Each student in the black belt course and higher was expected to donate. Again, a minimum of $100 was expected. Even though it was the celebration of Jesus Christ's birthday, Master Kim always had to be shown respect. One time, a lower belt told Russell he thought that instructors believed Master Kim was more powerful than Jesus. When Russell repeated this to his instructor, he responded by saying, "How do you know that Master is not?" As with the birthday gifts, each student found the perfect card on which to write a personal thank you note to Master Kim for passing down his knowledge through instructors and for benefiting their lives. Again, they were told the cash gifts did not go to Master Kim's personal account, but rather toward their future.
It was not only students giving cash Christmas gifts to Kim, but it was the instructors as well. I was led to believe that the instructors were paid very well, but that was a lie. Cash gifts that could have went to their families went to Kim instead.
One benefit of the parties was good food. There were no restrictions on food, so people pretty much ate anything they wanted. Most assistants lived on ramen noodles and junk foods, so these parties were a treat. They'd leave with enough food to feed themselves for days. One thing Russell liked about the parties was seeing the instructors' families. At these parties, he considered them family. Their children referred to him as Uncle Russell, but this was a charade. They shared training under Master Kim, but knew little of Russell's upbringing and what made him the person that he was. Likewise, Russell did not really know them beyond what he was supposed to see. At the Christmas party, each school would put on a play. Russell did not like having to act in the play, especially because he was not given a choice. One year, assistants from School C decided to do a play based on A Christmas Carol. Gilligan's Island characters were the Ghost of Christmas Present. Star Trek characters represented Christmas Future, and the Flintstones characters represented Christmas Past. During rehearsal at an assistant's home, someone played the song Lean on Me. They sang together, and though Russell enjoyed the sense of camaraderie, in reality, they were traveling down a dark path without knowing where it was heading. Russell's mother and stepfather Jim attended several Chung-Mu-Kwan picnics and parties, where Russell introduced them to many of the instructors and assistants. Russell's mom was proud of her son's dedication, thankful that the training straightened him out as a teenager. But she did notice the amount of control they seemed to have over Russell, and she expressed her concern.
At this point in my training, my mom and stepdad started to become concerned about the amount of control school was having over me. I don't know if the word cult had entered their minds, because no one at this point had heard of a martial arts cult before.
His instructor was aware of this. Russell's mom and Jim were moving into a new house and needed help moving, so a group of assistants offered to help. About 20 pulled up in trucks and cars. They and Russell had trained together, worked as a team, and made short work of the move. His mom and stepdad were so grateful that they tried to offer money, but it was not accepted. This experience eased his mom's concerns for a while. Russell needed her to experience seeing them work together as a team, and it was also a bonding experience for Russell and the other assistants. Main line of respect. In school, there was an idea known as the main line of respect. It was an invisible line of respect that could not be crossed, mainly focused toward Master Kim and higher belts. Questioning a higher belt's word, lying to him, or disregarding his direction are just a few examples of breaking the main line. Disciplinary action could result in a number of ways, including push-ups, loss of rank, expulsion from school, or even death. Russell was told that martial arts superstar Bruce Lee was a Chung-Mu-Kwan follower who divulged the secrets of his training. It was said that a higher belt from Asia was sent over to handle Lee. The higher belt injured the martial arts star without touching him, and Lee later died from that.
Several students say they were told Chung-Mu-Kwan was responsible for the death of Bruce Lee. Lee actually died in 1973 of excess fluid on the brain that may have been caused by drugs. The Chung Moo Kwan version is that Lee was a follower who divulged secrets.
Injury without touch is when energy is sent into the victim's body without physical contact and with a fatal result. It was also said that Master Kim could handle Lee with 2 fingers. The story served a couple of different purposes. First, it elevated Master Kim to the position of teacher and rendered Lee the student. Second, it explained how the school would handle a member who broke the main line of respect toward Master Kim. The Moo Handbook said that 2 years after the death of Bruce Lee, Warner Brothers Studios began their search for a replacement. After auditioning martial arts experts from around the world, Master Kim was asked to screen test and was subsequently pronounced the Warner Brothers selection. At that time, Master Kim was forced to choose between a motion picture contract and his art. Master Kim chose to continue sharing his knowledge, the handbook says.
According to the official Moo Handbook, John C. Kim was picked to be Warner Brothers' replacement for Bruce Lee. First he claims to be his teacher, and then he claims to have had Bruce Lee killed, and next he claims to be his replacement.
Main line of respect was similar to that of questioning orders of a military commanding officer. Higher belts could break main line of respect towards lower belts, but this was considered rare. Condition to respond. Much of Russell's training during 4th section was led by instructor Keith Brown. Training under him was intense. Every day was different. One day, Russell would step into school and Keith would be happy to see him, joking and smiling. Other times, Keith would tear him down, mentally and physically. In the same way Russell had witnessed Fred handle Keith, it was praise and punishment, carrot and stick. Russell would be called into the office for some minor infraction and be given what was known as an attitude adjustment. Every aspect of his life was torn apart in an effort to get him to confess or to reveal personal information that could be used to handle Russell later. The use of confessions is common among destructive cults and can have a purifying effect on the person confessing. It can also provide leverage to use on the person in the future, which happens often in cultic systems. Coerced confession can create a group sense of uncertainty. If a seemingly strong person is confessing, the weaker followers will feel less sure of themselves. Public confessions can eliminate the boundaries usually needed to maintain one's individuality. A symptom of brainwashing is the so-called cult of confession. While healthy groups encourage open-hearted lives and therapeutic sharing, unhealthy groups turn confession of sin into a means of manipulation and abuse. The Moo would use confession not only as leverage on a student, but also to break them down, and sometimes humiliate and degrade them in front of their lower belts and peers. One such incident that Russell remembers was when one of his higher belts confided to his instructor that he was still a virgin in his 20s. The instructor announced this during class, making it public for all to hear. Years later, Russell would receive an email from this individual recalling his embarrassment and the humiliation that he felt at the time.
I had experienced this very coercive tactic to get me to confess intimate details about myself that I might be holding back from the Moo. Most of the time it was done inside the office, other times in front of the whole class. But almost always it was loud enough to be heard by everyone so that it would cause embarrassment.
Sometimes, Keith would be irate about some minor infraction and say something in Moo's pidgin English like, "Would you do that way toward Master?" meaning Russell had disrespected Keith in some manner. Then he'd say, "If you do that way toward Master in Asia, you die. So why would you do that way toward me?" The way students carried themselves was always compared to the fabled schools in Asia or the schools in Chicago. Russell had no idea how martial arts schools were run in Asia, but he started to get an image of lots of students being killed for disrespecting Master Kim.
The phrase being killed was used a lot in school. It was used to instill fear and control.
Or, if you were a student in the Chicago area, you would be beaten. Saying these things was a time-tested technique of using fear to maintain the main line of respect throughout the school ranks, and especially toward Master Kim.
You think that if they were ordered to kill, they would kill?
Sure.
No, it doesn't surprise me that people would act out every single command that the management in Chungmu Kwan hands out, especially to the instructors, because that is how they're conditioned. They're conditioned to behave on command.
Russell tried to justify the reason for this torment, telling himself it was similar to Marine basic training. Although Russell would see others singled out and even break down in tears, he never saw Keith treat any of them as harshly as Keith did Russell. For any reason, Keith would order Russell to do from 50 to 100 Chungmu Kwan push-ups. Sometimes, Russell's arms would lock up for a couple of days afterward. People can only do so many regular push-ups, eventually stopped by fatigue. With a Chungmu Kwan push-up, you're in a circular downward dog movement that carries you farther than the normal push-up. This eccentric contraction motion causes an increase in intramuscle pressure, delaying the onset of the body's acknowledgement of its limit. Russell often wondered if he was being punished for stepping over Keith when National Instructor Fred ordered Keith to do push-ups, blocking the doorway to the school. Or was the victim becoming the victimizer? Russell would later learn the torment was ordered by the national instructors. He noticed the punishment was done only to those who had once trained under Aiden. Years later, Russell would ask Instructor Andy if the fact that he trained under Aiden caused this treatment. This is the response he gave in an email to Russell. When Aiden left, there were 11 assistant instructors at School C. Smoking Jared Jacobson came to School C to check our minds. When he was done, there were 3 of us left. I can remember pulling into the parking lot at School C and just sitting in my car, trying to get up the energy to go in and face Jared. That was one of the roughest times I ever went through. Mentally and physically, he destroyed me. So yeah, they tried to destroy the Aiden loyalists among us. One night, Jared sent me to get him a hot tea from the pizza place in the same strip mall as the school. I was in my uniform, waiting for the tea, when I looked over and saw Aiden with his girlfriend. This was probably 8 months after he had left. I went over, big smile on my face, and said hello. I was so happy to see him. He was ice cold. Aiden asked me what I was doing there, barely letting me answer, before saying that I had better get going. I was heartbroken. It must have shown on my face, because Smoking Jared asked me what was wrong. I told him I just saw Aiden. Jared bombarded me with questions. What was said? What did he look like? What did he say? Jared then sent Keith Brown down to handle. When Keith came back, Jared asked me how he looked. I said he looked really good. He then asked Keith how Aiden looked. Keith said he looked like he had AIDS. I had given the wrong answer. After School C closed for the night, we would all go down to School A to practice. On the way, I stopped to get gas, so I was about 10 minutes behind the others. Upon my arrival, I was drilled as to why it took me so long. Did I stop to talk to Aiden? I got the Aiden beat out of me in the practice area. Thanks for bringing up these memories again. Keith would have Russell practice an animal form called didoji, a small rodent that constantly digs. In the form, the student is low to the ground, constantly shifting weight back and forth while stepping forward across the room. As Russell stepped forward, he struck forward with an open palm, then shifted his weight to his back leg while doing a hook block. All along, Keith would stand next to him, sometimes with a gamdoche, practice sword, other times with a dongbong, short staff, or jongbong, long staff, hitting Russell in the legs, back, and arms. Sometimes Keith would swing the jongbong over Russell's head, and if he was not low enough, it would connect. Keith would stand over Russell saying, "Why don't you just quit right now? Why don't you just hand your belt in at the door? Want to cry? Go ahead and cry." The form was painful to practice, as it put stress on the lower back and upper thighs. Russell noticed that people who practiced this form developed bigger thighs, particularly women. Russell believed during this phase of his training that instructors had knowledge of exercise physiology passed down to them from Master Kim. But in fact, nothing could have been further from the truth. Years later, reports of injury and disability would be widespread from those who had once trained in the Mu. Keith himself would leave the Mu with a debilitating back injury. Russell would later learn that having students practice this form was sometimes used as punishment or as a way of checking a student's mind because of the pain and stress it inflicted, especially when combined with verbal humiliation, degradation, and being physically hit. This method was quite effective in conditioning him. There were no breaks to use the restroom or drink water. Several times this treatment lasted over an hour and a half. Other less intense practices could go on for hours. Russell was emotionally and physically destroyed. If Keith saw him look to the clock, he became more irate. This form of conditioning went on for several months. Other times, he would have Russell hold a mental form for long periods of time, and if Russell dropped his arms, the time would start all over again. Keith would continue to be next to him with a weapon, striking him. But the worst of it was the mental corrections. To be mentally torn apart, being asked, "Where is your mind? What are you thinking?" Russell would be singled out from a group of his peers and lower belts. Chastised and humiliated, he would be told that he was not being honest with instructors and asked what he was holding back. Although he refused to break in front of Keith, Russell was losing it. Had he known their agenda to break him this way, he never would have agreed to it.
At this point in my life, I had survived a lot of trauma, and I couldn't believe that I was actually paying someone to abuse me in this way. I began to question if I had made a mistake in returning to school, but I felt trapped living with other members.
So he stayed at his sister Patty's for a couple of days without checking in with the school or telling anyone where he was. After 2 days, his roommates Craig and James came looking for him, so he returned to school.
I was in the middle of a breakdown. Once I returned, my resolve to be an instructor hardened. I had changed.
Through this training, Russell was conditioned to respond to Keith's commands. After this training phase passed, Russell preferred to be trained by Keith. At one point or another, Russell was trained by most of the Minnesota school's instructors. If he ranked the school's top 3 instructors based on their ability to move compared to Aiden Gonzalez, it would be Jordan Bain, Jared Jacobson, then Keith Brown. After months of this treatment, Keith and Russell started to bond in some strange way.
I knew what to expect from him. I wondered if Keith put me through this kind of hell. What did Fred do to him?
Many times, Russell ended up assisting him during class, and even being sent to other schools to help Keith. He became very good at responding to Keith's commands. One night, while in a deep sleep, Russell felt a very hard slap on his waterbed and heard someone shout, "Wake up!"
I was dead asleep, and the next second I was on my feet in my underwear in bowing position, responding, "Yes, instructor." I had been conditioned to respond.
Standing in the bedroom was Keith Brown. He told Russell his waterbed was facing the wrong direction. It was bad to sleep with his head facing north. Keith explained that there was a certain bad energy from the north that could get into the mind at night if he slept with his head facing north. Russell took this as a reference to North Korea. He immediately began to drain his waterbed in order to take it apart and move it. It was 3 a.m.
Next week, on Deceive the Mooyers, more sacrifices for school will be made, and the return of Aiden. Deceive the Mooyers is a production of Deja Moo, LLC. Recorded and produced by Alive and Social Podcast Network. Russell Johnson, producer and writer. Charles Hubble, host and narrator. David Bruskin, editor. Russ Meyer, co-writer and editor. Aaron Troe, sound producer. Brian Price, audio editor. Wyatt Sarber, sound engineering. Woon Tae Ryu is our advisor in South Korea. Authentic is our advertising representative to see if the Moo Years is represented by Young Entertainment Law.